Let's talk about how I honestly feel in Diablo 4. I've gotten to level 82. I have basically completed my renown at this point. I have got all the altars of Lilith. Obviously beat the campaign and all of them in World Tier 4. My gear is looking pretty stout. I don't really know what left I could really farm at this point other than experience and do the pinnacle boss and, like a few other things at the moment. I've farmed, God knows, too many legendaries, done a bunch of PvP. You can see I got some ears in here too. I've been doing PvP, been playing with friends. I've also been playing solo. So I've had a pretty good amount of experience. And this is coming from a druid's perspective. Now, I have seen a lot of feedback related to this game, both extremely positive as well as extremely negative. And I have yet to find too much of good, nuanced conversation around the good and the bad around this game. And I'm going to do my very best to ride that line fairly. So let's talk about the good first and what I like about the game. I think the game, people say, is overwhelmingly complicated, but I actually think it's fairly decently simple. I think the skill tree isn't too confusing. It looks very confusing at the beginning, but legitimately all of these are linear. So this isn't something where you really have to worry about matching things too much. I think the Paragon board looks very confusing until you actually try using it. And then you realize, yes, it's still a little bit confusing, but it's not really as bad as it seems. If you can understand 90-degree angles and turning things, you can basically understand a Paragon board once you actually get your hands on it. Just looking at it, it looks very confusing. The way items work, the way legendaries work, the way uniques work, the way you acquire these all seem decently well explained, though. And I will say there are some things, for instance, like aspects having different tiers. For instance, the ancestral and the sacred being different colors and literally named different. Offensive aspect of the Raging. This is an ancestral legendary, but this one is a sacred legendary. And having absolute, basically, no difference in terms of what these items actually do, I think can also be extremely confusing as well. For instance, I have very often seen people say things like ancestral legendary aspects are better than normal. See how this one, it goes 1 to 5 seconds and is a maximum row of 5 seconds. But then this is a normal legendary ring that goes 1 to 5 seconds as well. It just says 3 there. And the reason people don't even realize it goes all the way to 5 seconds is because they have their tooltips off. So, and this is by default. So they have their advanced tooltips off by default. Shout out to Woody Joe actually for informing me about this because I didn't know this originally. And then they see it says 3 seconds here as well. And they think that one's lower than my aspect that's 5. So ancestral is higher. And so there's a lot of misinformation and confusion coming from a large amounts of players in the game, and that can get spread. So I do think there are some things that are fairly poorly explained in the game. However, once you understand the fundamentals of the mechanic, it becomes significantly more enjoyable. I do think there is something to be said for the world size. I feel like the actual size of the world, the fact that these Legion events, which, by the way, you can farm free horse cosmetic from here that's like a ghost horse, really cool. I think that the actual size of the map is significant. When I'm teleporting around the different areas, I do feel the variety in terms of what the landscape looks like. I do think it is fair to say that what a lot of people, the feedback I have read, is that people were surprised that so many of the minions look alike. This is true. It is a Diablo game. Hell is running over, and a lot of the demons are twins, apparently. So I do believe that there's something to be said for that. I don't know how you fix that within the ARPG hack and slash genre, to be fair, but I do understand that criticism, and I accept that. Now, in terms of the early, mid, and late game, I would like to get into that feedback as well. I think the early game is the most exciting. You're pushing through the story. What you're trying to do is fairly well explained. You're trying to do the yellow stories. They are very easily marked. There is good story dialogue. There is very good voice acting. This is Blizzard after all, so there's also very good cutscenes. Me personally, I found some of the boss fights to be way better than some of the other boss fights. I'll put it that way in order to keep the spoilers free. However, I have heard mixed reviews on the boss fights, so I will take that one under advisement as this is just my own personal opinion. I think it is not clear upon immediately playing the game what to do after the campaign, and I actually believe this is a good thing. I think the fact that it does not immediately tell you go and farm nightmare dungeons, go and max your renown, but instead you get the sense of the world has opened up to you. I actually enjoy that a good deal. I am an old school RuneScape player. I've played RuneScape since 2001 when it came out from Devious Mud. I'm actually older than I look, to be honest with you guys. So for that reason, I very much enjoy open world. I do not like hand holding. I like games that give me a character, and I feel like I am brutally trying to survive within the elements around me and figure out what's going on in the game. So I like that. The only thing I don't like is terrible, trashy UIs and bad quality of life. I would say the UIs could be improved. I'm not calling them trashy. I'm saying those are things I don't like. There is aspects of that I don't like. I would say right now, having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 gym slots all slotted up with gems is extremely annoying. Having no gym bag is extremely annoying. And having inventory space, you guys saw already my, let me walk over here and show you. You guys already saw my storage stash. And having a storage stash that is completely full with legendaries is very annoying. You might think, okay, this sounds like suffering some success. Oh, damn, you got so many legendaries, fuck you. But that's not what I'm saying. I cannot not pick these up if I want to. These are forced to be picked up to me. Unfortunately, I'm going to turn the alerts off so I don't keep spamming. Unfortunately here, these are forced for me to acquire. The reason is if a legendary drops in the field and I do not want that legendary and I leave the dungeon, when I go to my stash, that legendary shows up right here. And it gives me two options. I can either put it in my inventory or I can put it in the stash. Does not give me an auto salvage ability, does not give me anything like that. Also, the stash has no way for me to filter or search through, basically forcing me to go and hit the sort button in order to make them sort by type and then look through all the chest plates, etc., until I find one I want. So very often what I find myself doing is not wanting to look through 3,000 different items to find min-max rows from these tiny little texts that my eyes are blurring from playing the game 24 hours a day literally anyway. So instead, I'm just crunching everything and not giving a fuck. So I think that is probably some poor gameplay design in terms of the stash and the UI with these items. Now, that is going to be probably my primary negative feedback. There's one other point I would like to make, which is the dungeons. There are a lot of them. You are not required to clear all of them, but there are plenty of codexes here I have already done, as you can see, and there are plenty more still left to acquire. I do like the variety of having the legendary aspects at a minimum row. I think that's smart. So there is still a way and a reason to farm normal legendaries and not just use codex for everything. But this also makes certain builds more viable early and allows certain types of players to be able to build certain types of classes earlier than otherwise would have been possible with just pure RNG of getting the legendary items. This is almost like sort of being able to craft legendaries or set items from Diablo 3. This is the way of guaranteeing certain items. I think this was probably a necessity to keep players encouraged because of the difficulty of the game. Now, speaking of the difficulty of the game, I've seen mixed opinions. I've seen people speaking that the game plays very slow, that the gameplay is very hard, it is very brutal, and I enjoy that, is what people will say. Then I will see people that say this is way too easy. I'm blasting through everything. I got to endgame in 2 days, and I don't understand what I'm supposed to do now. So my addressing to these points is, really, I have multiple points to this, but I'm going to start with the most obvious, which is that players like me who are playing 24 hours a day in order to actually either make content creation on this or learn the entire game before the casual player in order to explain things to the casual player for the sake of media like YouTube views and Twitch growth, etc. We are not the standard players and should not be balanced around. The game should be balanced around the casual dad who comes home after a long day of work. He has kids that are yelling. He wants to sit down with his 1 beer a day and play for 2 hours. I think that is the target audience because this is now Diablo. The majority of the people playing this are in 30 to 45 age bracket. They're old school gamers that enjoy the game very much, and they do not have 24 hours a day to play this game. So I do believe that while I agree it is possible for people like me to get to the point of now all I'm doing is essentially grinding the same thing over and over again very quickly, I do not believe that should be in the conversation in terms of overall complete balance. I think very often the casual average game player, because I know there's hardcore community in these games, I understand, I myself am one. Again, I play RuneScape, takes the most hours out of any game the max, okay? That's just true. I understand that there is audience for these things, but the vast majority of players are not the 1%, like maybe you, the viewer, who is a very good long-term PC hardcore gamer. That is a small percentage of the players, and the most players are probably never even going to hit level 82. I don't think the majority of players are going to farm all 180 or something altars of Lilith that I farmed in order just to get the +2 strength on each, type of one of these. I don't see that happening, nor do I see the average player going into the Paragon board and spending 15 hours of their day while they drink their one beer to be able to figure this out. I do think what we will see is a vast majority of those casual players looking up a couple guides, a couple of tips and tricks. I myself have seen those search terms coming through. I know you guys are looking for them, figuring out the game on that level, and then playing through a pre-planned build. I think that's going to be a lot of players. However, in my personal mind, this would be a mistake. And the reason I say this is this game is actually, I think, very well suited for that casual type of player. I think the world tiers, seeing that there's only 4 of them, meaning every time you go from a world tier, it feels like a significant accomplishment. When you start in world tier 1 and then you bump up to world tier 2, and again, if you're min-maxing, you should start in world tier 1, as it is going to be faster and you will blast through it faster, so you can get to tier 3 faster and you skip to its entirety. But if you are the average user, you will start in maybe 1, think this is too easy, or maybe you just don't want to blast through things, you go to 2, and then each and every minion is going to feel like its own challenge, and that might actually be something that you enjoy personally. I also think that the discoverability of this game is insane. I think when you walk around the world and you discover these different dungeons, the different players that you'll see, the different events that will happen. You'll notice the codexes that will have rewards in them, even quests that are sort of hidden. Like, for instance, I have some areas I haven't even uncovered yet, and I've been playing the whole time. I think that is a fantastic addition to a Diablo game. I have played Diablo 3 significantly, and in my time playing Diablo 3, I felt like every single map was basically a linear path. It is me walking down a sidewalk to get somewhere, whereas in this, I actually do feel like I'm on a map. I'm on a landmass. I'm on a area, a state, whatever you want to call it. I'm in a world, is what it actually feels like. That is a step up in terms of environment, which I think is heavily important for the average player. I think that's heavily important to feel like you're within an actual world. I think this is doubled down by the fact that when you're walking around on the map, you'll also very much experience unique type of monsters. So they'll have like a star that will show up and have a unique monster, and also the side quests, which are crucially important, by the way, for min-maxers for renown. You'll want to do these blue quests. Don't sleep on them. It's a mistake I made. I also believe that these side quests do a good job at getting you to areas that you don't normally go. Like, you tell me what's right here other than Altar of Lilith that's down there. There's nothing here. So in order to get you there, they got a side quest to get you there to experience that. I also think the fact that after you beat the campaign, you can make a new character, skip the campaign, and start in multiple different regions is actually a very great quality of life for people that play through the game, beat the campaign, and then just want to try a new class because they're not trying to go to level 100 and min-max one class. Level 100 takes a very long time. The experience leveling in this game is very different than some of the previous games. And so for that reason, I think this was also a good addition. I also want to mention that I'm seeing a lot of people get very angry about balance changes. I myself did sort of a half-hearted meme video on the Druid balance changes. I was kind of joking around, but at the most part, I thought Druid legitimately, I was surprised with the nerfs. Even people like me who are complaining about nerfs to classes for the endgame, my opinion, while it may matter, does not matter as much as balancing the game around the average user and what they experience. And I think that average user, the changes were probably for the best. I think trying to make sure that some classes are not so complete outliers, that every single person feels like if you don't play this class, you're just stupid. I hate it in games when I join a game and everyone's like, you're playing that class? What a loser. I hate that personally. I think I really enjoy being able to feel like I identify with my character, which this game does very well. When I'm playing Druid, I wanted to play Druid because I wanted to shapeshift. I wanted to be a bear, mostly. That was like 90% of my reason. I also wanted to be a wolf. That was the other 10%. I got what I wanted. It happens to be the class is actually quite good. And that both of those builds, by the way, Stormwolf actually seems like it has some, I have all of the uniques now for the Druid. I will do a video on this, but Stormwolf seems like it has something coming. I have some footage of this. So in my own opinion, where I'm going with this, and you're probably seeing me mention quite often, is this game is probably a 7 out of 10 for min-maxers, maybe a 6 out of 10. For people that want to grind through, blast 100 and all that, I find those people, the conversations I'm having with those players, are getting bored quicker than they expected. However, for the average gamer, the 30 to 45-year-old dad who has a couple hours a day, I'm finding them enjoying the game even more than they expected. So there's a yin-yang balance. I think they sacrifice some of the focus on this hardcore community in order to engage a little bit more of the average old school gamer who maybe doesn't have as much ability to be that hardcore gamer that they fell in love with gaming in the beginning. I think this is a fine sacrifice because while you might think that focusing on the hardcore community that's just doubling down, playing the games all the time is their core fan base and they should appeal to these people, the reality is the core fan base is that dad who no longer has the ability, or that mom, okay, I'm not trying to do a gender thing, that doesn't have that ability anymore to play the games that they love and they desire because life happened. And I think Diablo 4 does actually a pretty good job at reestablishing this type of game into immediately being enjoyable for those types of players. So they might feel left behind in terms of levels, but they don't feel left behind in terms of loving the game. That's what I have found personally from talking to players. It's what I have experienced with my own gameplay, and this stands true the reason for me. I did find the endgame come sooner than I imagined. However, I found myself getting the endgame to be more enjoyable than I thought. And I have since upgraded my rating from a 7 out of 10 for myself personally. This has nothing to do with the previous ratings I just mentioned. But for myself, on the betas, I rated a 7 out of 10. I thought that was very fair. I've since upgraded to an 8 out of 10. I will say I have one other harsh criticism other than the filtering and stash issues with the items and the no search feature issues and the gem bag issues. There's one other thing, which is that dungeons were supposed to be fixed. They're not supposed to be kind of backtracking. I feel like I like putting it, if you have a line where you have to go this way, then back, then this way, but you take that line, you make it a circle where you have to go around, it's still the same distance, and that's effectively what happens. So I feel like I am still running the same amount of distance as I expected to with backtracking. I also find that the dungeons themselves do lack a little bit of variety, but they put a billion goddamn dungeons in this game. So they repeat some of the bosses. Those are really my only complaints. Other than that, I think this game, if you're the person who loved gaming growing up and has since lost the ability to play games 12 hours a day, like people like me that have no life other than video gaming, I think this game was designed for you. That's what I think. You know, I think there's a lot of conversation around the other side of the community, the hardcore, the niche, the small group. You know, I'm in that group, but I don't think it was designed for me. I think this game was designed for you.